Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be diving deep into something I think we all deal with, relationship conflicts.
Oh, yeah.
And not just any conflicts. We're
Right.
talking about the kind that even happen when two people are totally in love.
Yeah, that's right. It's funny. You think love would just solve everything, but as
Uh,
we're going to see, sometimes it's not actually a lack of love that's the issue. It's more about a lack of understanding.
that's really what stood out to me in the research for today's deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we have this guidebook now for how to figure out why we have these misunderstandings and why they get so big, and most importantly, what we can actually do about it.
Yeah.
I was especially interested in the idea of unconscious bias
Yeah.
in relationships. I feel like that's something I hadn't thought much about before.
It's really fascinating, isn't it? Like, we think we're being totally rational and objective, but we all have these biases that affect how we see our partners and how we react to them, and we don't even know it half the time.
So let's get into it.
Oh.
The research really highlights how this lack of understanding, not lack of love, is at the core of so many relationship problems.
Mm-hmm.
Why is understanding so important, especially for couples that really do care about each other?
Well, think of it like this. Understanding is the foundation of a house.
Okay.
When you feel understood by your partner, it creates trust and a sense of safety, and it makes you feel validated.
Right.
And those are the cornerstones of good communication and being able to solve problems together.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that solid foundation, even small disagreements can feel like an earthquake, and they can threaten to crack the whole structure.
And the research talks about how emotionally damaging this can be. You know, that feeling of being unheard or dismissed, or like your partner just doesn't get you.
Oh, absolutely.
I think we've all been there, and it's painful, and over time, it just builds resentment.
Absolutely. That feeling of not being seen or valued by the person you love can be incredibly isolating and damaging. And what's interesting is it often happens by accident. It's not that people are trying to be mean or that they don't care. It's more like a breakdown in communication.
Right. So let's talk about those communication breakdowns.
Okay.
The research outlines a few common barriers, and I think a lot of people will relate to this. You know, different communication styles or cultural backgrounds
Yeah.
that can lead to misinterpretations,
Mm-hmm.
or even just past experiences
Mm-hmm.
that color how we hear things. I mean, who doesn't have baggage,
Right. Everyone comes into a relationship with their own set of experiences and perspectives that shape how they communicate and understand the world.
Yeah.
And while those differences can make things interesting, they can also lead to misunderstandings if we're not careful.
For sure. So it's not just about being clear when we speak, right? It's about really listening and trying to see things from your partner's side.
That's a big one.
Mhm.
Because a lot of times we're so focused on getting our own point across that we forget to actually listen and try to understand what the other person is saying and feeling.
That's so true. And that leads us to another important point that the research talks about, the danger of assumptions.
Assumptions.
Yeah, there's this quote that really hit me. It said, "We assume we know what our partner is thinking or feeling, but how often are we actually right?" It kind of made me cringe because I know I do that.
Mhm.
My brain just tries to fill in the blanks, even if I have no idea what my partner's thinking. So how big of a problem are assumptions in relationships?
They can be huge.
Mm.
Think of assumptions as communication bypass surgery.
Oh.
Instead of having an open and honest conversation, we just jump to conclusions and fill in the blanks ourselves.
Right.
And honestly, we're usually wrong. That leads to misunderstandings and hurt feelings and ultimately conflict.
It's like we create this whole story in our heads without even checking if it's true.
Yeah, and those stories we tell ourselves can be really powerful. They drive how we react, and they can make arguments way worse, even if the original issue wasn't that big of a deal.
So let's go back to that idea we talked about earlier, unconscious bias.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain what that means in the context of relationships?
Sure. It's important to realize that we all have biases, whether we're aware of them or not.
Okay.
Our biases are formed by how we were raised, our experiences, the messages we've absorbed from society. They're like these invisible filters that affect how we see the world and how we see our partners.
So it's like we're looking through colored glasses without even realizing it.
Exactly. For example, let's say you grew up in a family where you weren't supposed to show your emotions.
Okay.
That might make it harder for you to pick up on your partner's emotional cues, or you might misunderstand their expressions.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense.
Oh.
So we've talked about all these barriers to understanding communication styles, assumptions, unconscious bias.
Yeah.
It's getting a little heavy now. Is there any hope? Can we actually overcome these things and build real understanding in our relationships?
Absolutely. And that's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive. We'll talk about some practical strategies for bridging the gap, improving communication, and ultimately fostering a deeper level of understanding with your partner. We often think about communication as like talking right. But in a relationship, listening is just as important, if not more so.
So they say, right, we have two ears and one mouth for a reason.
Exactly.
So let's talk about active listening. What does that really look like in a relationship? Because I think a lot of us think we're already good listeners, but
Yeah.
are we really?
It's easy to just passively listen.
Yeah.
You hear the words, but you're not really paying attention.
Yeah.
Active listening is different. It's about being present in the moment, really tuning in not just to the words, but to how they're saying it, their body language, the emotions behind it. It's
Yeah.
like you're trying to get the full picture of what they're communicating.
So it's not just about the words themselves. It's about understanding the whole message, right? What's
Yeah.
going on beneath the surface.
Exactly. And it takes effort. You got to put your own thoughts and judgments aside and really focus on your partner.
Okay, I'm picturing this like you're holding up a mirror to your partner, reflecting back their words and emotions so they feel seen and heard.
Yeah.
But how do we do that without interrupting or jumping in with our own opinions?
That's where those clarifying questions come in. Asking open-ended questions that encourage your partner to go deeper, to share more about what they're thinking and feeling.
Give me an example.
Things like, can you tell me more about that? Or help me understand what you mean by.
So instead of jumping in with solutions, we're just creating space for our partner to express themselves.
Exactly. And that can be really powerful. It shows that you're not just waiting for your turn to speak, but that you really care about understanding them.
Now, the research also talks about being open to different viewpoints. And honestly, that feels hard, especially when you're in the middle of an argument.
Yeah.
How do we stay open when we feel so strongly about our own side? How do we not get defensive?
It's important to remember that understanding doesn't mean you have to agree.
Right.
It's about realizing that your partner's perspective is just as valid as yours, even if you don't see it the same way.
Okay.
Imagine you and your partner are on opposite sides of a mountain.
Okay.
You both see different things, different views. Neither one is wrong. They're just different.
It's like that saying, right? Walk a mile in someone else's shoes.
Yeah.
You might not choose those shoes for yourself, but you can try to understand why they're wearing them.
Exactly. And that means being willing to step outside your comfort zone, to question what you think you know, and to be curious about your partner's experience.
But we've talked about active listening, asking questions, being open to different points of view. These are all great tools. But what about those unconscious biases we were talking about?
Right.
How do we even know they're there, let alone do anything about them? Feels like a bit of a trap.
This is where being self-aware is so important.
Okay.
Start by paying attention to how you react. What are your triggers in the relationship? What are your hot button issues? Those triggers are often like big flashing signs pointing to deeper issues, things that might be coming from your past.
So those triggers are often connected to something deeper, right?
Yeah.
Something from our past that's affecting us now.
It's common, yeah. It could be a pattern from how your family interacted or a past relationship, or even just messages you've picked up from society. The key is to notice those patterns and start to question them. Ask yourself, is this how I'm feeling really about this situation, or is it something else?
So it's like becoming a detective in our own lives, trying to understand what's shaping how we see things.
Exactly. And it can be tough to do that, but it's worth it. The more you understand your own biases, the better you can manage them and the better you can communicate with your partner.
Okay, we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel here. But let's talk about something practical. Let's say we're in the middle of an argument, things are heated, and we're not understanding each other. What's one thing we can do right then to calm things down and try to move towards understanding?
Here's a simple but powerful technique. Try saying what you think your partner is feeling.
Oh, interesting.
You could say something like, it sounds like you're frustrated because, or let me see if I get this. You're feeling like.
So instead of arguing our own point, we're trying to show them that we hear them. That must feel validating.
It does. It shows that you're making an effort to see things from their side. And that can go a long way in calming things down.
Right.
And sometimes just hearing their own feelings reflected back can help them process those emotions and communicate better.
It's like hitting the pause button on the fight and giving each other a moment to breathe.
Yeah. And in that pause, you might find that the problem isn't as big as it seemed. You might even find some common ground that you didn't realize was there.
This is all about changing how we think about conflict, isn't it?
Yeah.
Instead of seeing it as a battle to be won, it's a chance to learn, to grow, and to understand each other better.
And that's where the real magic happens. When we approach conflict with curiosity and empathy, it can actually strengthen our connection and bring us closer.
So we've talked about a lot, active listening, asking questions, Being open to different viewpoints, even tackling those unconscious biases,
Hmm.
it feels like we're building a whole toolkit for better communication and understanding in our relationships. But what happens when we hit a wall? When we just can't seem to bridge the gap? That's what we'll talk about in part 3 of this deep dive, so stay tuned. All right, we're back for the last part of our deep dive into understanding in relationships. And, even with the best intentions and all these communication skills we've been talking about, we're still going to hit some roadblocks.
Yeah, for sure.
Those times where we feel stuck like we're not even speaking the same language.
Yeah.
And it can feel kind of hopeless.
That's the reality of relationships, right? They're complicated. They're always changing. And sometimes you just get stuck in these cycles of miscommunication and conflict no matter what you do.
So what do you do when you hit those walls? Because the research talks about how sometimes, even with all the tools we've discussed, understanding can feel impossible.
I think the most important thing is to remember that you're not alone in feeling that way.
Yeah.
Every couple goes through this, and sometimes it makes sense to get some help from outside the relationship.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Yeah.
When is it time to call in reinforcements? Like, when should you think about couples therapy or talking to a counselor?
If you and your partner keep having the same arguments over and over, or if you're just feeling overwhelmed with negative emotions, or if you're finding it really hard to communicate effectively, those are all signs that it might be time to reach out for some professional support.
Right. It's like having a coach in your corner, someone who can help you see what you're missing and give you some new perspectives and help you build a stronger relationship.
And having an objective third party there can make a huge difference. A good therapist can create a safe space for you and your partner to explore your communication patterns and unpack the underlying issues and find healthier ways to interact.
Now, the research also mentions the importance of self-care when you're dealing with conflict in your relationship. It's easy to get so focused on trying to fix things that we forget to take care of ourselves.
Oh, absolutely. When we're stressed and overwhelmed and emotionally drained, it's so much harder to communicate effectively and be there for our partners. It's like trying to run a marathon without eating anything. You just don't have the energy.
So how do we make self-care a priority, especially when we're already so busy? It feels like just adding another thing to our to-do list. Is it more about a change in mindset?
It's about realizing that taking care of yourself isn't selfish, it's crucial.
Okay.
It's about filling your own cup so you have something to give to others. When you're grounded and balanced, you're way better equipped to deal with the ups and downs of your relationship.
It's like that saying, put on your own oxygen mask first before you help others. You can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly. Make time for things that make you feel good, whether it's exercise or spending time in nature or connecting with friends or even just reading a book. Anything that brings you joy and energy.
And this probably also connects to setting boundaries in the relationship, right? Knowing when to take a step back and take care of yourself. Not to escape the relationship, but to make it stronger.
Absolutely. Boundaries are so important for protecting your own emotional and mental health. And they can actually strengthen the relationship by creating more space for respect and understanding. It's about finding that balance between being there for your partner and honoring your own needs.
So we've covered a lot in this deep dive.
Yeah.
We've talked about why we have misunderstandings, the power of listening and empathy, the value of getting outside support, and the importance of self-care. It's been a lot, hasn't it?
It has. And remember, relationships are always a work in progress.
Yeah.
There will be those amazing moments of connection and those tough moments of disconnect. But if you're committed to understanding and you're willing to learn and grow, you can get through those challenges and build a stronger, more resilient bond with your partner.
And at the end of the day, isn't that what we all want? That deep connection, that feeling of being seen and heard and understood by the person we love.
It is. And remember, understanding isn't just a destination, it's a journey. It's something you're always working on, learning and growing and evolving together.
That's a great way to put it. So we're going to wrap up this deep dive here, but we hope you've gotten some valuable insights into how powerful understanding can be in relationships. And remember, the next time you're in the middle of a disagreement, take a deep breath, step back, and ask yourself, am I really trying to understand my partner? That one question can make all the difference.
And if you want to learn more about specific ways to handle conflict, build a deeper connection, and strengthen your communication skills, be sure to join us for our next deep dive, where we'll explore those topics in more detail.
Until then, thanks for listening, and keep diving deep into the amazing world of human connection.